has changed the learning curve and dispersed the knowledge of how this is actually possible, that the mind and the body are two separate entities and can exist without one another. So, how do you get that to happen? Well, in 1982, the movie Tron came out, where Jeff Bridges digitizes himself and goes into a mainframe computer. In there, he interacts with programs, nowadays we would call them NPCs, and goes up against a giant intellect, which we would just call a mainframe or an AI unit. This introduced everybody to the idea that there's a world out there. If you had enough technology, you can get there. After that, in 1992, Lawnmower Man came out. Now, this introduced the idea that anyone could go in there with just a little bit of equipment. And what he did was he actually changed the person's mind that went in there. He became more intelligent. And at the end of the movie, he pushed his entire entity into the internet. Now, this was interesting because he left the body behind, separating the two. In 1992, Freejack, I'm sorry, in 19 and yeah, Freejack came out. Now, when Freejack came out, they really went all on this one. Uh, After your death, you're uploaded up to a church computer. And then when they brought back a body, you are then downloaded into the body. This kind of shows that whole transcendence things where you can take a person's mind and not only take it out of the body and copy it out of the body, but actually implant it into a body. In 1995, Ghost in the Shell came out, which was groundbreaking. What would have happened if I could just take the person's mind and or person's brain and put it into another form? There we had people in brain boxes being put into um, artificial life forms, and they could walk around, and after they died or the body became disabled, you could put it in another one. Now, the protagonist himself in the movie had no body. He was Mr. Nobody. He just existed. In 1999, The Matrix came out and changed the way we viewed Descartes' theory, because Keanu Reeves existed in a body, in a cell, in a gel cell, but his mind was actually living in a virtual world. He didn't know it at the time, just like we wouldn't know it now if it was happening right today. It became very accepted that a virtual world that now looked exactly like the world that we're living in is now capable to have it. In 2000, the 13th floor came out. This was an interesting one. This one, instead of having artificial entities walking around or um, physical beings walking around, they took it where they created a virtual world, and you downloaded yourself into an NPC that was actually having a life in there. It was actually an AI, and you were copying yourself over the AI's brain. Now, what happened was, in that realm, they created another one. They were in the 1990s, they were bored, so they created a 1940s version of that. And you can go deeper and deeper, and they just layered it. And it was very much like Inception. After that, in 2010, Dot Hack Sign came out, which was an anime where a boy was stuck inside of a video game. Now, everybody else thought, okay, this is a science fiction thing, this is this. What happens if it was a common thing where everybody was going in and out, whatever they feel, but somebody gets trapped in there? What would you do if you knew that you were trapped in a video game but couldn't remember what it is outside of your video game? And a lot of people believe that's what heaven and hell is. That you're put into this body, and after you die, well, then you go back and you remember your life and you remember the horrible things that you did in this life in this video game. In 2012, Sword Art Online came out, and that's where 10,000 people were stuck in a video game. And if they died here, they would die in their own life, and they remembered both of these. This was kind of the dystopian part of what would happen if. In 2013, Log Horizon came out, and what they did was, what would happen if the NPCs didn't know they were NPCs? Again, just like 13th Floor, they were living their life. You came into it. However, you knew it was a video game. This really shows the acceptability that we've gotten, where if I put a helmet on you and I dropped you into a different realm, you would be okay with it. After that, came out Ready Player One. And in 2018, there's two versions of the two shows that you really have to see. Ready Player One shows that a man who creates a giant video game, the entire world goes in and out of it playing, and it becomes society's norm to be in that virtual realm. At the end, you find out that he may have actually digitized himself. He may have been in that game as he walks out. So we're not really sure how that ended. Where can you put yourself into a giant game, which is a consumerism? Last is Altered Carbon. Altered Carbon is a Netflix show where you are in a chip, and again, the gentleman is brought back 200 years later on a chip, given a body, but forced to do work. Sure, you die, you can get a new body. However, what at what cost? So we went from going in and doing utility work in a very, very fragmented world, and this is a very special thing, to now we're totally in acceptance of it. We accept that the mind and body can be separated, and they don't exist in the same thing. And going from one body to another is totally acceptable. So that this is my presentation.